Okay, so this brand new iPad Pro M4 comes in at about $999, and this brand new iPad Air comes in at about $599 for the base model. So my question is the iPad Pro actually worth the extra money, or are you just throwing your money away? Whether the iPad Air even makes sense as a purchase, or if you should just get an M1 or M2 iPad Pro. Both are fantastic options, but there's only one right answer. Make sure you guys watch till the end of this video because I have some thoughts. Okay, so I've personally been using both the brand new M4 iPad Pro and the new M2 iPad Air for a full week now, and I think I've just about summed up my thoughts on both of these devices and who should buy them. Now, iPads are hands down one of the most confusing products to me in the Apple lineup. Now, part of me wonders why we even get upgrades on iPads, because software-wise, these things were kind of maxed out for power per use case like years ago when the M1 chip was introduced to them. Like 95% of people don't really need any more power than that M1 iPad Pro, to be quite honest. And then you also have some naming conventions which get a little bit odd. Like, for example, shouldn't the iPad Air signify it being quite a bit lighter and thinner than the iPad Pro? But no, this year the Pros are skinnier and lighter than the iPad Air, so what gives and why is there such a big price difference? So let's first start with the design. Okay, look, this time around the design on the iPad Pro is fantastic. Now, without getting into like the stats on how thin and how light it is and whatnot, I'm just gonna tell you straight up, if you're thinking that, okay, the thinness and lightness of these devices don't really mean much, it feels kind of incredible. It's almost surreal. And when you compare it to the iPad Air, the Pros do seem quite a bit thinner and lighter. Like I mentioned earlier, the Air name just doesn't make sense anymore. Now, my main issue with the design of the iPad Air is that they didn't actually make any changes to this from prior year. It's pretty much the exact same iPad Air that I've had from like 2 generations ago, and it still works with all of my old accessories as well. Next, I want to talk about the display, because this is where the iPad Pro actually doubles down again. And we have this brand new tandem OLED screen, which is absolutely incredible. It's basically 2 OLED screens stuck together to give you 1000 nits of brightness on SDR content and up to 1600 peak brightness on HDR content. Now, this technology itself, when I think about it, it honestly is incredible, because OLEDs typically give you the best quality contrast, but their Achilles heel has always been brightness. But what Apple has done by adding 2 OLED screens together is they've been able to boost the brightness to their mini LED level screens without sacrificing any of the contrast and black levels that you usually get with OLED. And when you pair this with the smooth 120Hz ProMotion display, my goodness, this, in my opinion, is the best screen I've seen on a device to date. Now, I'm gonna quickly also touch on this nano texture option that's available on the Pro, but to be quite honest, anybody who's cross-shopping the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, I doubt they're gonna opt for that, because in order to get the nano texture display, you have to go with at least the 1TB model iPad Pro, and your price point jumps from like $999 to $1699 for the 11-inch model. Now, all this is a much more matted out screen, and it does make some differences here and there. Like, for example, it reduces glare and stuff like that. When you're looking at it in sunlight, it's supposed to be much better. But look, other than that, the Air screen, okay? I gotta talk about this because look, again, no real changes here. We still have the same 60 Hz display, which I don't care what anyone online tells you, it's a huge downgrade on experience. And not to mention the 500 peak nit brightness on the 11-inch iPad Air and the 600 nits brightness on the 13-inch Air, which is barely perceivable. It's also something that I'm a little bit annoyed by, but the 60 Hz, come on, that's just criminal in 2024. But look, it's not all bad. For an IPS panel, this thing is actually pretty good. Contrast ratios are great, and you get the P3 wide color gamut, so if you're doing things like editing photos or doing creative work like drawing or coloring and whatnot, it's good. Next, let's quickly touch on the accessories. Now, I won't linger on this topic too long, but just know that both the Air and the iPad Pro will support the new Apple Pencil Pro. Both the new devices that just came out are the only devices that will support the Apple Pencil Pro. The Apple Pencil Pro is not backwards compatible, so if this is a big deal for you, then you have to go with one of these two. And to be quite honest, I was actually quite surprised by this, because I really didn't expect Apple to bring the Pro Pencil to the iPad Air, but I'm glad glad they did, because this will allow Air users to actually avail some of the new features that come with the new Apple Pencil Pro, such as squeeze the barrel for tools and stuff like that, and haptic feedback and barrel roll, etc. You also get hover on the iPad Air now, which previous models didn't have. So if you're an artist or someone who uses the pencil a lot on your iPad, these changes are very nice to have. Now, speaking of accessories, another big deal is Thunderbolt 4 on the iPad Pro is a big win, because this gives you up to 40 gigabits per second transfer speeds as opposed to the 10 gigabits per second on the iPad Air. So if you're doing stuff off hard drives and stuff like that, then the Pro will definitely be much more helpful. You'll have much faster data transfer rates and it'll support a lot more things. Also, another quick note, if you have been really impressed with the new iPad Pro like Magic Keyboards, the Air only has access to the old Magic Keyboard, so you don't get the new one, which, to be honest, I don't know why anybody who's considering the iPad Air will even go for the Magic Keyboard, because that thing is like half the price of the Air. So generally, if you're going for the Air, you're trying to get an iPad for as cheap as possible to try to get the most bang for your buck. Next, let's talk about performance. Now, on paper, I know the M2 versus M4 sounds like a huge 2-generation jump, right? The M2 chip on the iPad Air and the M4 chip on the iPad Pro, my goodness, that's gonna be a huge difference. But in reality, Apple actually skipped a generation here with the iPad Pros, and the new iPad Air is simply as powerful as the last gen iPad Pro. Now, I said this at the beginning of this video, and I'll say this again, the hardware and chipsets were never a limiting factor with the iPads. And honestly, the M2 chip on the iPad Air is fantastic. Any sort of video editing, photo editing, creative work should be perfectly fine on the Air as well. You're not gonna have any issues. Both the Air and the Pros also have dedicated media engines for encoding and decoding video, etc. But one thing to note, the M2 iPad Air does not have ProRes encoding and decoding like the iPad Pro does, and also it doesn't have that powerful onboard neural engine that the M4 iPad Air does. However, you're still going to be able to use AI and do all of the things that you want to do. It's just going to be a little less smooth, which honestly is not a big deal if you're saving that much money. Now, if you are a gamer, there's no hardware accelerated ray tracing on the iPad Air now, which means some GPU heavy creative work as well as some games might not be as smooth as they would be on the Pro. But if your gaming is mostly on Apple Arcade and stuff like that, honestly, you're not even going to notice a difference between the two for the most part. Okay, so let's bring everything together and conclude on it. Look, the M2 iPad Air definitely seems less exciting, and I'll be the first one to admit it. There's not much difference compared to prior generation iPad Airs, except for things like the inclusion of now Bluetooth 5.3, Wi-Fi 6E. You also get access to the new Apple Pencil Pro with all those features that it brings. So all in all, not much has changed. But if you're just looking for a solid iPad with great performance, with the latest chipset, and has access to the Apple Pencil Pro, then the iPad Air is a reasonable choice. I think this will really be popular for people like students and those who are much more value and budget conscious, but also want to buy like a brand new device for their family member or something like that. It's also the more, I guess, sensible option. But yeah, there's something really to be said about these absolutely brilliant OLED screens, the speaker system, the top-notch performance, especially for creative work, which will likely future-proof you for years to come. And not to forget the Thunderbolt 4, which helps with external displays and data transfers, and this beautiful new, really light, thin package that it all comes in. Look, I know it is a $400 difference between the iPad Pro M4 and the M2 iPad Air, and not to mention, if you're getting the iPad Pro, you might even just pick up the Magic Keyboard, which will basically put you out of pocket $700 in total with the keyboard. But I gotta say, the experience I get with the iPad Pro is unparalleled. And frankly, I just can't for the life of me go back to this outrageous 60 hertz panel on the iPad Air. So if at all possible, if you're able to stretch your budget a little bit more, I would definitely recommend that you try to spring for the iPad Pro. And if you can't do that, then maybe even consider going to the refurbished market or the secondary market and getting an M2 or even an M1 iPad Pro. You'll still get that 120 Hz Hz display, you'll get that stellar mini LED display, plus on refurbished, you could probably get a solid deal as well. The only downside with doing something like that is you don't get access to the brand new Apple Pencil Pro, but is that really a big thing you're gonna miss? Unless you're an artist, of course, and if you're an artist and you really heavily rely on the Apple Pencil Pro, you wanna have these brand new features, then yeah, that's where the iPad Air comes in. I think it's the cheapest entry in order to get to the Apple Pencil Pro, because people that use their pencils on a daily basis are gonna want the Pencil Pro, and then when they look at the price tag for the iPad Pro M4, they're gonna be like, man, I'm just gonna go ahead and get the iPad Air just because it's so much more cheaper. But yeah, by going with the older iPad Pros, at least you get that 120 Hz display and you don't have to live with this 60 Hz display, which will make you feel like you're back in 1998 sitting in your uncle's basement connecting to AOL dial-up. In any case, I know this video was a little bit of a hot take, so if I ruffled some feathers, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And until then, I will see you guys in one of these two videos over here. Peace.